What is up, YouTube and X? I have an incredible guest, Greg Boysen. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
I've been watching your stuff for years, so it's very cool. I just want to ask you first just about where you think the direction of the Blackhawks are going.
Well, I mean, I think it's headed definitely in the right direction. There's a lot to be excited about. It's probably not going as fast as some fans want it to be. I think last year was not a step backwards, but definitely not as big of a step forward as we wanted to see prior to March. I think Kyle Davidson learned a hard lesson when he said the expectations are raised and finishing bottom of the league is no longer acceptable. And then you finish in the bottom of the league again. I don't think he's going to make bold statements like that anymore. And we've already seen him kind of tamper the expectations of this summer. Not saying he's not going to do anything, but he's learned to don't make blanket statements, because when they don't come true, people are going to burn you for it. But you're heading in the right direction. We saw after the trade deadline what is coming. This team went from being one of the oldest locker rooms in the league to one of the youngest locker rooms in the league. And someone who was lucky enough to get access to that locker room, the vibe was much different, after the trade deadline, after Seth Jones was traded, after, Taylor Hall, some of these veterans were gone, and guys like Frank Nazar stepped up. And Sam Rizzo and Oliver Moore show up, and Lev Shanoff is there, and it's just all these guys that you've been hearing names of. Not only do they show up at the same time, and they produce, and it looks better. Like, you're starting to see what can happen, and those guys are just the tip of the iceberg. They're just scratching the surface of what is possible. It's heading in the right direction. Still going to be a little longer. It's not there yet, but you could start to see what it's going to look like, and that's the key. And we said, going into last season, even if they finish bottom of the league again, which they did, but you're seeing guys who are going to mean a lot to this organization going forward take steps forward, and it was a successful season. So now they got to build on that. They've got the best coaching staff that they've had here since the Cup run. It's a real NHL coaching staff. Let's see what they do with it. So there's definitely reasons to be encouraged, but I'm not telling people to put money aside for those playoff tickets just yet.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. But talking about the coaching staff, what do you think of Jeff Blashill and what he'll bring to the prospects and the younger players on this team?
Well, I mean, I was pretty much like everybody else when the name first started showing up. It was kind of like, meh, okay, sure. And once his name got out there, you knew that was the guy, because the Kyle Davidson led front office does not let things get out unless they want it to. So once I saw those reports, once Frank Saravalli had it, I was like, yeah, okay, this is the guys. I started doing some digging. I talked to a handful of Detroit beat reporters that covered him for those 7 years. And the more I learned about him, not only as a coach and as a person, the more I got excited about the hire, the more I warmed up to it for sure. He got 7 years in Detroit. And
Yeah.
6 of those 7 years were losing seasons, not by his fault. I mean, he got the Luke Richardson Blackhawks. They tore it all down, and he learned from that. But the fact that he got 7 years with a dismal record tells you a lot. I mean, they respected him as a coach. Guys, Luke Richardson didn't even get two. He got not even 3 full seasons.
Yeah.
And so that tells you, they had patience with him and they respected him. And then 3 years with Tampa under John Cooper, huge. And if you listen to him on his introductory press conference, he had a lot to say about that and what he was able to learn from that. So I'm a big believer in the second time around is usually better for NHL head coaches, especially with those 3 years as an assistant in Tampa. Not only learning habits from the best coach in the game, but watching habits from some of the best players in the game. And learning from that. So if he would have gone from Detroit to Chicago immediately, I wouldn't be as approving of it. But the fact that those 3 years away to learn in one of the best organizations that have a great culture, and then to bring that here is a good move. So I think Mike Sullivan was never going to come here. I wanted him, but it wasn't going to happen. We know that. David Carl, I was not big on that, because not that I don't think he might be a really good head coach. He might be, but it's another unknown. It's another guy doing it for the first time. And I'm just tired of that. I want somebody here that's been through it before. And he's won at every level he's been at, outside of that run in Detroit. And he's brought in a pretty good staff. Michael Pekka, two-time Selke winner as a winger, which is almost unheard of these days. So he's going to bring in that defensive responsibility that this team needs. Mike Vellucci is a guy that's been around forever and has won, in the OHL. He's won a Calder Cup. He spent the last 5 years under Mike Sullivan. So you have a lot of good experience there. And of course, Anders Sorensen is still with the team. And the players, especially the young players, really respect him. Probably not the greatest in-game coach, as we saw over the second half of the season, but he's a really good skills guy, and he's a really good, in putting guys in positions to succeed. So keeping him, I think, was a really good move. So I'm excited about this coaching staff. It's legit. It's not a bunch of guys doing it for the first time and figuring it out as they go along. They're going to come in here with a plan that they know works, and hopefully they can implement it.
Yeah, and to your point, 7 years in Detroit for Jeff Blashill. The average coaching stint is 2.4 years in the NHL, which obviously, like you said, 6 of those were losing seasons, and it was coming off to the point where their 20-plus year run in the playoffs was coming to an end. So it was impressive, and I do like that he was with John Cooper, so I do totally agree. I do also think that something that Blackhawks fans aren't thinking about is Sorensen being able to develop more players at the NHL ranks, because before it was just trying to get as many wins as possible, and that seemed like a mission impossible with Tom Cruise when you have this kind of roster that we had. So speaking of Sorensen, I know that there was a player in the AHL that really started hot, and Lucas Reichel, but then he could never just get it together. What do you think is the Blackhawks' future with Lucas Reichel?
It's not a good future, I don't think. I think, he is a guy that just, for whatever reason, can't put it together. You see flashes, you see what, made him a first round pick in the first place. He's a really good kid. He's easy to root for. He's always easy to talk to, and just always in high spirits. I give him a lot of credit for that. Where it could be very easy for him to just, be demoralized at this point, but he puts in the work. He wants to be a top 6 player. I don't know if that's ever going to happen here. Might happen somewhere else, but he got a 2-year deal. Obviously, Kyle Davidson still believed in him, but last season, it just feels like if he can't become a star on these last 2 rosters, where all the opportunity in the world was there for him to take the ball and run with it, I just don't know if it's ever going to happen. And it's going to get harder for him as more of these players come up. Frank Nazar has knocked him down the depth chart, and you're going to start seeing when more and more of these young guys come up. Another draft class is going to get taken in June, and 3 or 4 of those guys are instantly going to be better prospects than he is. So I think they're going to listen to offers on him, maybe a change of scenery type of trade where you trade him for another team's Lucas Reichel and you see if it works. You've seen that happen in the past. I'm rooting for him no matter if it's here or elsewhere. As I said, he's a good kid. I've known him since his Rockford days, and the talent is there. I just think his biggest enemy is between his own ears right now. And sometimes you just need a different, perspective to excel. I know a lot of people thought, last year he was only on the 4th line, didn't get a lot of chance, but he was on that 4th line because that 4th line was really good. Like, he was really good with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith for most of the year. He actually, I think that was a better position for him. I know people say, he should have played with Connor Bedard, but, you play with Connor Bedard, you're constantly going to be looking for Connor Bedard. If you're on a line with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith as Lucas Reichel, you are the best offensive option on that line. So go be that. And at times he was, and other times it was just, he was a passenger. So, I don't think his future with the Blackhawks is long term.
Yeah, I really did not think about being the best player on his, or offensive player on his line, and what that would do. Because I was in the boat to put him in the top 6 and just let him cook with like Nazar, or even give him a shot with Oliver Moore and stuff. But that was actually something that I haven't thought about, so that was really good. And speaking of the class in June and the draft, who do you think the Blackhawks will take at 3rd overall?
Third, when you're picking 3rd overall, you need to take best player available. It shouldn't be, we need size, you have to take the biggest player. You don't do that at 3rd. And the 2 best players that most likely will be available are James Higgins and Anton Frondell. And if I'm picking between those two, and I'm thinking I really feel the Blackhawks are leaning that way too, Anton Frondell at that pick, just because I think Higgins has the higher offensive upside of the two players, but I think Frondell is the better all around player. Gives you a little bit of something. I think Higgins has a higher ceiling, but Frondell has a much higher floor. So even if he doesn't hit his full potential, you're still going to get a pretty good player. Where Higgins has that boomer bust kind of feel to him, where like he's either going to be great or it's not going to be very good at all. Frondell's bigger. I'm not a guy that freaks out over smaller players. I know the Blackhawks have a lot of them, but I mean, James Higgins is 5'11". If he was an inch taller and 6 foot, nobody would be freaking out right now. So he's a very good player. I'm not going to be upset if they take Higgins, but I think Frondell fits what they're looking for. He's a bigger player. He's got really good speed. Takes him a little time to get to that full speed, but that's something that can be worked on, with coaching and development. But he's got an impressive 200-foot game. He plays well in all three zones. As I said, he's got a size advantage. 6'1", over 200 pounds already, and he played in the second tier league in Sweden. So he was playing against veterans and grown men. He wasn't playing against teenagers, and he was impressive, and he held his own. I think he's the pick, and unless somehow the Islanders and the Sharks pass on Misa, I mean, I think Frondell is the best available guy at that point, and that's who they'll take.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Frondell for me. I saw him obviously at the combine, and this guy is a lot taller than you would expect, and also he's a lot stronger. Like, he's a ball of muscle. He's always doing something athletic. Like, Victor Klingsell told me to ask him basically about him juggling with the floor ball, and he just juggles and plays tennis all day if it's not playing hockey. So this guy is bred to play sports. He's very athletic. And then to your point with James Higgins, I actually had a 30-minute sit down with him, and we were just drinking, some waters and stuff, and I guess the blood was flowing with all the waters, and he was telling me about all the stuff about how he watched the Blackhawks. Patrick Kane was his favorite player to watch too, other than Islanders hockey, as well as Connor Bedard's the best player under 23 in the NHL, which I loved. So he was saying all the right things to try to get on the Blackhawks, as well as Porter Martone was too. I mean, Porter Martone was saying all the right things to be a Blackhawk. So obviously for prospects, we are a very, very good place to go with our young core. And speaking of our young core, I just want to ask you who you think the best Blackhawks prospect in our pool is right now. I mean, that can go to like Levshunov, Rinzel as well, like a couple games in the NHL. But who do you think our best prospect is?
Well, obviously you're not considering Bedard or Nazar as prospects anymore. Those are NHL guys. Levshunov is definitely in the conversation. He's still got some ways to go. We saw flashes of what he's capable of, not only in Rockford but in his brief stint here. He struggled a bit in that second round series against Milwaukee in the AHL playoffs, but that was a big, strong team, and they were targeting him on the forecheck, and he didn't handle it very well. But again, a teenager, he's got time to figure that out. But you saw why they used the second overall pick with him. Rinzel is definitely up there too. Just such a smooth player, and with his size, I mean, that pick is going to go down as a great pick. That, at the time it was a project pick, maybe taking him a little too early, but as your third pick of the first round, you already had Korchinski and Nazar at that point. Why not take a guy that was going to take 4 or 5 years? 3 years later, he's in the NHL and probably staying there. So his development has been amazing. I think if other teams had crystal balls to know how fast he would improve and where he'd get, he would have been a top 6, top 10 pick easy that year. So those guys are definitely on the list. Nick Lardis is a very intriguing prospect, probably has the best shot of all the prospects. Obviously had the huge season, over 70 goals in the OHL. It's going to be interesting to see how he can translate to the pro game. There's been a lot of guys that lit up the OHL and never really fizzled in the NHL. So we'll see how he goes. He definitely needs to put on some size, but he's got time for that. But he's definitely an intriguing prospect. And then I'm really high on Sasha Bover too. I think he's going to be a really good player, a two-way player. He's transferring from North Dakota to BU. So, I mean, goes from one elite program to another elite program. Be interested to see what he does after this season. If he, goes pro after this year, likely, but we'll see. So those are guys to be excited about. And then whoever they pick at 3 this year is going to be in the conversation as the best prospects. It's nice that you can ask that question and we could throw out 5 or 6 names. Whereas opposed to in years past, you were like, I don't know, all these guys suck. It's a good time to be a prospect junkie for the Blackhawks.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's awesome looking at the prospect pool because before, like you said, it was like Lucas Reichel, and that's all we had. And we were holding them tight, as well as Samuel Savoy and a bunch of other guys. But we didn't even talk about Colton Dock or Logan Slaggert or Landon Slaggert and a bunch of these guys. Like, I really do like Sam Renzel. I think he's going to be an absolute star. That 2022 draft, if you rearrange the picks a little bit, like Frank Nazar went 7, Sam Renzel went 13, and Korchinski went 25, it looks a lot better. I mean, even though it already looks incredible. So hindsight is 2020, but would you have picked Ivan Demidov before Artem Levshunov, like going back now, in your opinion?
I mean, I wanted Demidov at 2 at the time, but I wasn't enraged with the Levshunov pick. I mean, it's a tough choice. It's still so early in both of their developments, but what I've seen from Levshunov in Rockford this year, those are the type of players that you don't pass up on. If he hits his potential, he's going to be more valuable to you than Demidov will be to Montreal. Demidov still has a lot of work to do. He had his debut against the Blackhawks, and of course he had that huge first period. But then if you go back and watch that game, the Blackhawks score the game-tying goal because he falls asleep on defense. And there were a lot of times this year where you watch a goal against Montreal and he's kind of just standing there. Not saying that's not going to get better. It's going to have to get better, but he's not, the second coming of Mario Lemieux or anything like that. So it's easier to find Ivan Demidov than are to find Artem Levshunov. You can get guys like that elsewhere if you don't have them. So at the time I wanted Demidov. Now I'm okay with, I would think I'd stay pat. If Levshunov hits his full potential, he'll be a more valuable player to the Blackhawks than if Demidov hits his full potential with the Canadiens.
That's a great explanation. Very good. Honestly, I was a Ivan Demidov guy as well. Levshunov obviously was the pick, but yeah, you're right. Like, right-handed defensemen that are on the right side are going to be a lot more valuable. I think the thing that was a little interesting was the scouting staff saying that he never gets beat, but you got to see him live against Milwaukee in Milwaukee. So can you tell me about like how him and some of our prospects were playing, like how you saw them live and how you thought they played?
Well, it was an interesting series because they'd won the first 2 games in Milwaukee in a 5-game series. You're coming back home for 2. All you have to do is win 1 game, and then they lose 3 in a row. But they caught Milwaukee because of the AHL playoffs. Milwaukee hadn't played in 13 days before that first game, and the Ice Hogs had the play-in series with the Wolves that they beat 2 straight. But overall, I think the prospects were pretty impressive. That first game, all Milwaukee wanted to do that first period was to just hit anything that moves. They were more interested in finishing checks and taking shots. That was their game plan. That's the type of team they are. They're a veteran-heavy team. And they withheld, they were able to hold it. As I said, Levshunov struggled a bit with the physicality. I think that was the most physical anybody had been with him. He struggled with it at times, but you also saw him make some really nice plays in the offensive zone and through the neutral zone and leading breakout. His game is not just on what he does defensively. It's also about what he can do with his feet, what he can do with the puck and getting it out of the defensive zone. And he was still good in those aspects. Like the having a hard time with the physicality didn't really concern me that much. Those are things that you get better with at time as he gets bigger, as he gets used to it. So that wasn't too concerning. The guy that impressed me the most that series defensively was Kevin Korchinski. He looks like a completely different player than the guy we saw his full season here. He was not backing down from that physical play. He was engaging in the physical play. He was getting in those post scrum whistles, causing some of them. Like, he was not backing down, and that was impressive to see because there were a lot of times during his rookie year that he was just getting beat physically, and you could tell it was taking its toll on him. But he's gotten stronger, and he's gotten that mindset that he's not going to be intimidated. So that was impressive to see. Colton Dach scored a huge goal in that series. So, I think Colton Dach is going to be a really nice, effective bottom six guy for the Hawks. The guy that I thought has improved the most out of the recent draft picks from beginning of the year to the end was Gavin Hayes. He had a really nice series. He had some good chemistry on his line, and he started. I mean, he got injured and missed about a month of the season, so it took him a little while to get. But the last month of the year in the playoffs, he was playing his best hockey. I don't know what his future brings with this team because, again, another draft class is going to come in and is going to move him a little further down the organizational depth chart. He took strides and he looked like he belonged. So I really liked what I saw out of Gavin Hayes in that series and basically down the stretch in the regular season too.
Well, to stay at Gavin Hayes, how incredible would it be if he hit for that Kirby Dach trade? Because it was Kirby Dach for Gavin Hayes and Frank Nazar. So, I mean, he's the forgotten man in that trade, but if he hits, that would be absolutely incredible. I didn't know, obviously you can think of all these prospects as assets at the end of the day. They all have to be signed and there's only a limited amount, but at the same time, they're assets. So you can go out and trade somebody too and make a big acquisition. But to go back to Kevin Korchinski. Do you see Kevin Korchinski being a top four defenseman in this for the Blackhawks next dynasty?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what he was drafted for. The skill is there. Offensively with the puck, he's incredible, and he's got that speed, and his skating is so smooth. He's going to skate himself out of a lot of trouble. It's just getting it all together, and he's still so young. He's 20. He's got 2 years pro. Defensemen at that age take so much time. The guys like Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar that can just step right in and be superstars from day one are needles in the haystack. They don't happen very often. A lot of fans, who got on board during the Cup era, they don't remember the development and how long it took Duncan Keith to get to where he was by the time they were ready to win Stanley Cups. He spent 2 full seasons in the AHL, and his first couple of seasons in the NHL were not great, but he kept at it and got better, and then he became the Hall of Famer that we all know him as. Like, seeing all these trade rumors with Kevin Korchinski involved in it, it's silly. You do not trade a guy like that at this point of his career just to move up 1 or 2 spots in the draft. Now, if he's involved in a trade to, say, get you Jason Robertson or someone like that, okay, I'm all right with that, but to trade him just to trade him, no. You didn't draft Artem Levshunov to trade Kevin Korchinski. You drafted Artem Levshunov so you can have Levshunov, Korchinski, Rinzel, Vlasic all in the same core. I mean, if Kevin Korchinski maxes out and hits his full potential and he's your 4th best defenseman, you have a really good effing team.
Can you tell me about who you think the Blackhawks are going to take at 25 overall?
Tougher to pick than the 3rd for sure, because there's no guarantee they're even going to use that particular pick. If they're going to trade up, it might be later in the round to move up to get a guy, maybe at 19 or 20 that they don't think is going to get to 25. The guy I would love to see them get either at 25, but they'll probably have to trade up to get him, is Jack Nesbitt. I'm a big fan of his. He fills that size void, 6'4". He's an old school power winger, but also has the hockey sense and the cerebral awareness to play and excel in today's game while being that old school punishing forward. And the Hawks should be very familiar with him, as he was a teammate of AJ Spellacy in Windsor, so they've probably seen him a lot. So I would think that he's a target of theirs. So that would be a guy that I like there. There are a ton of names there, and that's such a hard one to predict because you really don't know who's going to be there. With 3, you for the most part, who's going to be there. So, it's easier to debate, but here you really don't know. But, another guy that I like at 25, but maybe he's available with that first, second round pick. Will Horcroft is another guy that I like a lot. Malcolm Spence is a guy that will add some size. And I know that Milton Gastrin is getting a lot of, connecting to the Blackhawks there. So there's a lot of choices there. A guy that I like that probably would be a stretch at 25 would probably be available in the 2nd round, maybe even the 3rd round. But if he's your guy, maybe you go for it. I wrote about him the other day, is Daniil Prokhorov. I really like his game. Another huge winger guy. Yeah, I mean that guy just his mission is to like check people in the fourth row, but he could score goals too. So I don't know if 25 is where you get him. You could probably get him later in the second round, or maybe even third round. I mean, but if you have third overall and that's the guy you believe in, and you got to take some, kind of like Renzel in 2022, where you're like, yeah, we're probably taking him a little early, but we have the time to let him, develop because we had these other earlier picks. Maybe that's what you do, or maybe you use that pick, to make moves, and you acquire another second round pick and you get him there. But there are so many different options there. I think whoever they pick with that first round pick, if they make it, or that second round pick, that's where you go for the side.
Yeah, just a rundown on some of the players because I absolutely love the players that you picked and the prospects. Milton Gasherin is one of my guys. He is such a down-to-earth person, really explained to me the NHL draft process for about 30 minutes. And this is just a guy that really plays with hard skill, and he can get to the middle of the ice, and he is a leader for that Swedish team. So he's always been very good. Malcolm Spence would be phenomenal. He's going to Michigan. He played with Martin Misiak, so they've obviously saw him a lot with Erie Otters, and he plays a hard style, and he's very intense. So he's going to be a playoff player for us. Maybe he's a third liner, but I think it's a third liner with upside. You said, I mean, Jack Nesbitt is awesome. He's very big, like you said, old school style. I think he would be a phenomenal fit for the Blackhawks, and not a lot of people are actually mocking him there. I'm saying more Jack Murtagh instead of Jack Nesbitt, and I think Jack Nesbitt is actually the better fit for us. So I really like that you said that. And then the last one you said was Will Horkoff, and Will Horkoff actually met with 31 teams in the NHL. The only one team he didn't meet was with the Blackhawks. So I always felt that kind of funny. I think he would be the perfect fit for us.
They don't want.
They don't want to let anyone know. But okay, so Prokhorov too, incredible description of him. He is literally a bottom sixer that I think has a lot of scoring touch, and he's 6'5", playing in like what was it, the MHL this year or
Yeah, he was in the MHL. Yeah.
MHL.
Yeah.
And yeah, he played really well. So I thought that was like somebody that is going to get drafted a lot higher. Like you said, I could see him going 62 to the Blackhawks with that Stars pick. Really like that breakdown of players there. And can you tell me from goalie aside, because I know that we should be drafting a goalie probably every maybe year, every other year. So do you think that this is the year that the Blackhawks are probably going to draft a goalie in the second round? As well as, do you think Spencer Knight is the goalie of the future for our team?
I don't know if they're going to draft a goalie in the second round. They've done that twice here in the last few years with Comezzo and Guyan. And I'm a believer in drafting a goalie every year, even if it's your last pick, 6th, 7th round. Draft a goalie every year. You can never have too much goaltending. And I've talked to Mike Donaghy in the past, and he's a former goalie, and he's like, yes, draft all the goalies. You can never have too much goaltending. So all these extra picks. If you grab a goalie in the 5th or 6th round, that's a long-term project. That's great. You don't need a top prospect here. I don't think you use a second round or even a third round pick on a goalie. You're in a good position with your goaltending right now. But if you want to use 5th round or later to get a long-term prospect, I'm on board with that. Draft a goalie every year is my philosophy. Use those late round picks for goalies. Spencer Knight, goalie of the future. That's what he was acquired to be. He's still very young and got a long way to go, but we've seen him, have some amazing games. His debut against the Kings was incredible. We've seen him have multiple 40-plus save efforts. But when we've also seen him give up some goals, we were like, okay, that needs to be worked. It seemed shooting up high on Spencer Knight is where the goals are. But you could say that about a lot of goalies. But Spencer Knight definitely has the ability and the raw talent. You see it there. And the fact that he gets to now work with Jimmy Waite is going to make him even better. Jimmy Waite's one of the best, if not the best, goaltending coach in the game. And being in Florida, you have to imagine that the goalie coach is probably spending a little more time on Sergei Bobrovsky than they were on Spencer Knight. So now it's going to be a difference for him this year, because it's going to be the first time in his career that he is the number one goalie. There's no doubt he's going to be the number one goalie for the Hawks. So that's a different kind of pressure to be the guy that, like, you're the guy that's playing 3 out of 4 nights. You're our guys. I think he is. And Drew Comezzo, man, he was so good the second half of the season where I think a lot of people thought, oh, because they traded for Spencer Knight, the team's given up on Drew Commesso. And then Drew Commesso was like, nope, I'm still pretty darn good. Arvid Soderblom bounced back really well last year, and you still have allegedly this Laurent Brossoit guy. And I still don't know if that's an actual real human being. But goaltending is not something I'm worried about these days with the Hawks. I think they're kind of solidified there for a while.
That's awesome. I was actually going to ask about Drew Commesso because what he did in the playoffs in the last stretch of the second half was absolutely incredible. And we drafted him 46 overall for a reason. So I think he was the forgotten man in our prospect pool. I think Guyan is now where Commesso was a year ago or 2 years ago, where it's like nobody remembers who he is anymore. I was an Andrew Christel guy, but I won't talk about that because I really wanted him. But is there a sleeper in the Blackhawks prospect pool that you really like that you think doesn't get talked about?
I mean, there's a few of those guys actually, because they're so deep right now, and it's kind of top heavy, to where those guys get the your Lev Shanovs and your Korchinskis, and those guys are definitely going to get all the top billing, and deservedly so. But I mean, there's so many guys that aren't even in professional yet that people forget about. Guys like Vanacker is a guy that just to talk about, where like, yeah, he was a first round pick, but Nick Lardis got all the attention on that team, but he had a really solid season too. A guy like Aiden Thompson, I don't think gets enough hype. I was able to see him in that Milwaukee series, and his speed is legit, and he's older. He's a guy that I think might contend for an opening night spot this year. I don't think he's going to be a superstar by any means, but he could be that fast bottom six guy. He can be that Christopher Stieg type player that is a matchup problem for other teams. So guys like that, you even mentioned a guy like Martin Miziak. He's another guy that I don't think gets enough credit. He had a really good junior season there. So tons of guys that are not necessarily the stars, but the guys that you need to win. Samuel Savoie is another example of a guy. You need guys like that to win, especially come playoff time. Jack Pridham had a really good year once he got to the OHL. He's another guy that could be a sneaky good. And the guy that, I'm a huge fan of that doesn't get a lot of attention because of where he's playing is Roman Kantarov. I think that guy is a legit top 6 player for the Blackhawks in 2 years. He doesn't get enough pub just because, he's in Russia. There's not a lot out there on him. You can't get a lot of good information on him unless you're, a Russian scout. So, but watching him play, that kid is going to be really good, and I'm excited to see him when he gets here. Not this year, but the next.
Yeah, Roman Kantarov is legit. Obviously, he's on the smaller side, but he does not play small. He was almost, I think it was a point per game as a rookie in the KHL. It was destroying Michkov and Davidov's numbers for a little bit. Obviously, they caught up to him, but he has a lot of upside. That was an absolute steal by Kyle Davidson that he does not get talked about enough.
No, he's a guy that when he gets to North America, people are going to be jumping on that bandwagon real quick.
Yeah, I hope that he brings that like Artemi Panarin-esque chemistry with Bedard and then Frondell up there, because obviously I think we're going to take Frondell and play him as a winger. I think that unless obviously we could put Nazar there, then he would be the true center at our 2C. But yeah, the Blackhawks are just loaded with talent. Oliver Moore, Sasha Boisvert is probably our C. I know that you weren't the biggest fan of Tyler Bertuzzi when we signed him, and obviously you were ultimately right with that. Do you think that they're going to try to trade him or buy him out this offseason?
I don't think anybody's trading for him, to be honest with you. But, listen, Kyle Davidson was able to trade Seth Jones in about a week, and he was able to trade Peter Mrazek and actually get like a live human body back for him. So nothing is impossible. I don't think it's worth buying him out at this point. Tyler Bertuzzi is who Tyler Bertuzzi is. What we saw last year is what we get, is what he is. He's a streaky guy that will score a lot of goals from the side of the net on the power play, but he's not the Max Domi. People think because his last name is Bertuzzi that he's this Brad Marchand rat kind of guy. He's not. That's not his style. Yeah, I was not a big fan of the signing when it happened. And then as the year went on, I was kind of like, see, I told you he's not a terrible player. He's just not a good fit for what the Blackhawks are trying to do. He's not fast enough to be a consistent player on this team, especially going forward. Kyle Davidson is building, trying to be the fastest team in the league, and Tyler Bertuzzi does not help you in that whatsoever. So he's valuable to this team. He had his best pro career year was playing for Jeff Blashill. Jeff Blashill knows how to use him correctly. So I think he's going to have a much better year this year. I mean, he scored 30 goals playing for Jeff Blashill. That's not anything to sneeze at. I'm not saying he's scoring 30 goals this year, but I think he has a better idea of how to use him. He was his coach in Grand Rapids too, so he's got a long history with them. So I think he's going to put him in better positions to succeed than last season. But as far as trading or buying out, I don't see that happening. Not this year. What you hope for is, that magic with Blashill returns, and then maybe someone gets desperate at the trade deadline or next offseason because they're like, oh my God, Tyler Bertuzzi, this guy's off. This guy's awesome. He still got to go play for the Rangers and is that the only original 6 he hasn't played for? So it is Leafs, Bruins, Red Wings, Hawks. So he still needs and the Maple Leafs. So he just needs the Rangers.
Oh my God.
So trade him to the Rangers, help him complete the original 6 tour, and life is good for everybody.
And then the Rangers will dish him to the Ducks in a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rangers are trading everybody these days.
But obviously, there was a Daily Faceoff article that said the trade targets, and Connor Murphy was 14. Do you think that the Blackhawks are going to trade Connor Murphy during the offseason or the trade deadline, because now we have more retention slots that are opening up?
Probably more so at the deadline, because I don't think you really need to do a whole lot of retention on him, because his deal is pretty, and with the cap going up, his deal is pretty, it was cap friendly to begin with, but now it definitely is even more. I think we'll know what their plans are with him, but what they do this offseason. If they sign another veteran defenseman to a longer term deal, then maybe they look to move him. I think he's more of a candidate to get traded at the deadline than in the offseason. You still need that veteran guy. And Connor Murphy is huge in that locker room. He's one of the team leaders. He's one of the guys that will mix it up, defend a teammate. He's a pro's pro. You still need those guys around this young core. I know some people are like, oh, he's taking a roster spot. No, he's serving his role perfectly. The biggest problem with him the last couple of years is staying on the ice. The way he plays the game, his body's starting to feel the effects of that. So I expect him to be on the opening night roster, but trade deadline, maybe they move him. And I kind of hope they do, I want Connor Murphy to play some playoff games, play some meaningful games. I mean, the guy deserves it. He plays his ass off every night. He's the definition of a warrior. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago that the Blackhawks would have won the Nicholas Jarmelson trade by a mile? And they have. And that's no disrespect to Nicholas Jarmelson, one of my favorite Blackhawks of all time. But the version the Coyotes got was not the version we saw here. He talking about guys whose bodies started to betray him. Connor Murphy is going to go down as one of the most underappreciated long-time Blackhawks to ever play here.
And he never complained. He was a captain for Team USA. Like he was just what we needed at a time where everybody was leaving. We got him very young, and now he's what is he, 32, 33 now? I can't even. Yeah. So for the last question that I ask you, can you take me through what you think that the Blackhawks should do in the offseason? And is Mitch Marner a good fit for the Hawks?
Yes. Yes, he is. He is a perfect fit for the Blackhawks. I wrote about that over at Chicago Hockey Now, that the likelihood of him coming to the Blackhawks is not great. He's going to have a lot of contending teams coming after him. The hand-wringing over every day, there's multiple reports. It's the Ducks, it's the Kings, it's the Hurricanes, it's the Knights. Every day, not even every day, every hour, it's another team that's going to make the biggest push. So he's going to have his pick of where he wants to go, but the Blackhawks have a lot to offer, including money. They can outbid anybody they want, but they have a lot to offer. I think the way he plays the game fits Jeff Blashill's coaching philosophy to a T. Blashill believes in good defensive habits lead to offensive chances and more offensive zone time, and Mitch Marner is proof of that. I mean, he was a Selke finalist 2 years ago as a winger, and that doesn't happen very often. Like, there's only been 7 guys since the year 2000, 7 wingers to even be a finalist for the Selke. That is a center-dominated award. Only one winger, Yuri Lentinen, has won the Selke since 2000. Marian Hossa, one of the best defensive wingers we ever got to see play, never finished higher than fifth in the. I'm not saying Mitch Marner is a better defensive player than Marian Hossa. That'd be sacrilegious. But just the fact that he got that recognition shows you how good defensively he is. And I know he's a playoff ghost. That's a load of crap too. He was still a point per game player this year. He had 13 points in 13 games. Yeah, he looked bad in those 2 6-1 losses to the Panthers. So did the rest of the team. How come nobody's talking about Auston Matthews has just 4 goals in his last 18 playoff games? That should be the story, not Mitch Marner. So he would be a perfect fit for the Hawks. And you're catching him in the prime of his career. His defensive habits leading to good offensive chances would be huge for Connor Bedard. And think of what that can do for Frank Nazar to have a guy like that. And Frank Nazar's already buying into that and already plays that way. Now you get an elite guy that can do that on a nightly basis to kind of rub off on him and show him how to do it. It's going to make him a better player. So there is no bad side to signing Mitch Marner. Will they get him? Probably not. Should they try? Yes. So, the offseason, it's going to be a tricky one. And Kyle Davidson, as I said earlier, has set the tone of don't get your hopes up. That's not him saying I'm not going to try. That's just him being realistic, saying it's going to be difficult to get one of these top tier guys here. So he, again, learned his lesson, like I said before, not going to make a big declaration like I'm bringing in the best free agent and then not getting it. So that soundbite could live forever. So if you can't get Martner, there's some other good guys out there. Nikolai Ehlers, I think, would be a really good fit on this team. Even a Brock Besser would be a really solid addition. But they may have to go the trade route. That might be their way to get another player. They have to bring in something else. You can't just bring back that team from March with all these young guys. Some of those guys need to go to Rockford. And I think Oliver Moore starts the season in Rockford. He does what Nazar did last year, where he goes to Rockford and then he basically tells the Blackhawks, yeah, I'm not an AHL player anymore, and you bring him up. So I think you definitely need another scoring option. If Ryan Donato's not back, you got to replace that somehow. Even if he does come back, there's nothing wrong with having 2 30-goal scorers on your team. So I think they definitely need to add another top 6 forward, whether that's free agency or they figure out a trade or it's an offer sheet. There's a lot of options out there. So a top 6 forward, and then I would definitely go for another veteran defenseman. Not necessarily anything long-term, but again, you need another guy in here if you need to give Renzel some time in Rockford, or if Korchinski just isn't quite ready yet, or Levshunov needs more time in Rockford, you got to have another capable guy, but a guy that knows what he's coming into, that hey, you're going to be our 5th defenseman to start the year, but by the time Christmas comes around, you could be elsewhere. That's what I'm looking for this year. I think you nailed the coaching staff. You've got the young talent to developing in the right way, but you still got to add a little more. You've got to take that next step, because I want to see the Blackhawks be like what Utah was this year, or what the Islanders were, as far as you're going to hang around for a while, and then at the end the better teams are going to get past you, but be more competitive. Play some games that actually mean something in January, February, March. That's what I want to see happen, and you still need some pieces to get there.
I would love to be the Islanders in Utah, because obviously they had incredible seasons and then they won the lottery. So
well, yeah, that's the perfect scenario, is you finish worst, almost make a playoff run, and then you somehow get Gavin McKenna because Gary Bettman wants Gary Bettman. Hey, you love the Blackhawks, make it happen.
I would absolutely love that, and I think Connor Bedard and Gavin McKenna would absolutely love that. Obviously, they're cousins, not by blood, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was a wonderful time talking to you. You can link all of your descriptions in the comment section, or I'm going to link everything in the description. So thank you so much. Here's your time if you want to plug anything like Hot Ones video or anything like that.
Oh, no, just check out. I've been writing over at Chicago Hockey Now, still figuring out what is going to happen for next season. But for right now, I'm writing every day at Chicago Hockey Now. Morning chirps every morning, get you caught up. Doing some draft profiles. I got a reader Q&A going to come out either later today or early Friday. So keep going. If you want to become a member over there, we have yearly memberships that are if you use the promo code Greg10, you get $10 off. And your yearly membership not only gets you all the insider articles there, but across our entire National Hockey Now network, and worth every penny and free browsing when you're a member. So all those annoying little Google ads disappear. So that's worth the money right there. So Greg 10 gets you $10 off. That's $30 then for an entire year membership. And not only helps me out, but it helps out a lot of the other great writers we have in our network. So that support is appreciated.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And thank you so much, Greg. You are somebody that is very inspiring to me and so many others out there. So thank you again.
Appreciate it. Anytime.